I go off to vacation and we got the SBC news and then the Uvalde shooting, and it just felt like it was too much emotionally to handle. And maybe you felt that way. Maybe it felt like there was too much hurt. How can you follow God? How can you move on past this if that's even the right thing to do? Today we're gonna address all of that. Let's begin. A good old Southern pastor was in Greece recently with a bunch of other pastors, and they were touring like the Holy Land. And on this one particular day, they went to Mars Hill, where in Acts 17 is that moment where like Paul's like, hey, I perceive you guys are holy people because you have an idol to every single god that you could imagine, and you guys seem to be very religiously minded. In fact, they even have an idol to the unknown God. And Paul says, therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you. And he preaches to them the gospel. Now remember, these are like prime philosophers of the day. The Lord had, in his goodness, prepared, taught, raised up Paul to be educated, to be Greek, all of those things for a moment like this. And here Kevin, this pastor at Mars Hill, and interacts with someone that the Lord totally had ordained for him to come in contact with. His name was Robbie, and Robbie was a Muslim from Tunisia. Now this just happened a couple weeks ago. I'm retelling the story like third hand, but roll with me here. And here Kevin, studying the New Testament, thinking about Acts 17 here, and he comes in contact with Robbie, and they get to talking. They're like, why are you here? Why are you here? And Robbie, this Muslim from Tunisia, says, I come here because I think it's really important for people to have a philosophical answer for why we have life, why we exist. Kevin's like, really? Because I'm a pastor. I know Jesus. I have the answer for you, bro. And Robbie says, I could never believe that. The world is too hurtful. There's too much pain. There's too much sorrow for me to follow your God. I think today, you and me, when we see the Uvalde shooting, when we see the problems with the SBC and all that just came out this week, or like really any sorrow that's going on in your life, I think we know like Jesus wept and we know all the Bible things that we're supposed to believe, but it's really hard for us to connect the dots about how we're supposed to suffer or lament. If you guys don't know, Uvalde shooting in Texas took the lives of numerous children. I think the last number I heard was 19. And teachers, it's horrible. And I don't really want to get into the details because I know of so many people that are really sensitive like me. I wear it on my sleeve, the heart pain. And if you're like me, when you come before the Lord after something like this, or even the news about the SBC, it can be kind of hard to say, God, you're the same God that has control over that stuff. And yet you allowed it. You knew that was going to happen. Like, how do I reconcile all of this pain, all of this hurt? And first off, I would acknowledge that there's an entire book of the Bible, not just this book, but especially this book, Lamentations. It's a valuable thing for us to kind of dial into, that God, even though he is the hope of the world, he gives us room to lament. He himself wept even though he knew he would raise Lazarus from the grave. This is totally a side moment, but as a female on YouTube, every single time I mention my emotions, I always have somebody call me out and say, well, you're just being emotional. Typically it's a male. I'm just gonna be honest. But I noticed that they don't do it to my male counterparts here on YouTube. They don't knock on them for having emotions. And I would push back just a little bit. I'm not like trying to get too feminist here or anything like that. I'm just genuinely saying that we are given our emotions for a reason. And David was an emotional dude. Jesus was emotional. And our emotions are a gift. May we never be Christians that are emotionally dead. Feel your emotions and have your emotions lead you to the cross. They are one of the most powerful witnessing tools that we have to other fellow human beings, is to be a human being and still choose to follow Christ. Just like Kevin, that Nashville pastor, was talking with Robbie, that Muslim from Tunisia, on Mars Hill. Robbie had just said, I don't follow Jesus, or I could never follow Jesus because of the hurt in this world. Kevin was able to say, oh, Robbie, I follow Jesus because of that, because he is grace and truth. So even though there's hurt in the world, Jesus gives grace and mercy and love, all the while being true. I think that is something that we often forget about Jesus, like his justice and his mercy and how those two things meet. God is perfectly just, but yet the cross doesn't look just. If we're gonna be honest with you and me, the cross is not just, except for the fact that he reconciled his need for justice. He reconciled the cost that needed to be made for our brokenness in and through himself on the cross. Justice had to be made, but he met that with himself. So many people say, well, why would God make rules if he's creator of the world? Or why would he allow sin? But what we miss when we ask those questions is that he met the cost with himself. And he offers grace, he offers love, he offers mercy, and he is all the while truth. I think what we miss more often than not, we want to jump to action and we don't allow ourselves and other believers to lament, to hurt, and we don't love each other in that hurt. I'm like very not politically minded. I'm not gifted in understanding a lot of like politics, political terms. It's something that I'm growing in, but I'm not naturally gifted or inclined towards those things. And so I will probably like rarely ever make political statements on my channel. And as believers, we're called to mourn. And I think people from both sides of the political argument, people that are like, we need to ban guns or whatever, and people that are like, no, we need to do more mental health stuff. And so people on like both, like whatever viewpoint you hold of like shootings and guns and even the SBC situation and like how they're supposed to move forward, or I'm not gonna say it doesn't matter your viewpoint, but no matter what point you take, there's something to be mourned there. And don't skip over the call that we have to feel and to mourn, because I think that informs our next steps. And if we don't truly allow ourselves to process, we will get caught up in the politics. And if I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys, it's not that I don't think politics are a necessary part of our Christian outworking, but I do think we jump there way too quickly as Christians. And we miss the meat of the hurt, of the sorrow. What would Jesus be doing? Would he jump to politics and reforms, or would he get down in the mud and weep with those who mourn? I think we as Christians jump to Instagram to make political statements. Even I on my Instagram was like, what do you guys think? And I got like a bunch of responses, which were totally helpful. And thank you guys if you made a response on my Instagram. And I think we as Christians need to make space to mourn, to be broken, to just pray and not try and make statements or announcements or arguments off of anything. I know someone will probably pick this apart, and that's just part of putting my mind out on YouTube. But when we look at the scriptures, when we look at the New Testament, what were they expecting Jesus to be? They expected him to be a political reformist. They thought he was gonna be like a warrior to overthrow Rome. And he came and was a lot more about the relationship, a lot more about the heart. And I think we as Christians fall into that same deception, that the battle is won in politics and in our Facebook arguments. And I think it's a lot more about the heart. I think it's a lot more about individuals, and that's a lot harder, I know. It's a lot easier to call your congressperson, and it's a lot easier to just make a Facebook post. But what if what we truly to believe Jesus is and was in the Bible? What if that truly informs the way we now respond to even our strongest sorrows? What if that informs our politics? Because again, I'm not saying that we don't take action, but I think we really need to take a deep breath and really feel the gravity of some of this hurt before we jump to the next step. Again, we don't want to forget the hurt and the broken. We don't want to not take steps, but we want to feel. Most Christians get on their proverbial Mars Hill and they die there. If they were Paul in that moment, they'd say, all of these idols are wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. But what they would miss there is they wouldn't be valuing the heart of the hearers. They wouldn't be in the brokenness with them. And I love Paul's approach to the conversation. He said, I see this idol to the unknown God. Let me reach your hurt. Let me reach your questions. Let me reach where you are right now. We need as Christians to give room to reach people where they are now and give room for grace, because I know I definitely don't have it all figured out. Now, Robbie and Kevin, that pastor from Nashville, eventually went to dinner and they sat down and they talked through the gospel. And it turns out Robbie had actually had seeds planted in his heart. He actually had a Bible in his childhood, and he came to faith that night in a random restaurant in a random part of Greece with this random pastor from Nashville, Kevin, the Southern boy, and a Muslim boy met, and the gospel was shared, received, and Robbie repented and turned from his sins and came to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. What if we don't die on our Mars Hill, but we get in the moment, we get into the hurt, we get into the questions like Kevin did with Robbie, and we get to the heart of the matter. Instead of distancing ourselves from the matter, let's get into the heart of the matter and hurt and ask and therefore live surrendered to God and try to have it less figured out ourselves. My desire here on my channel is to teach you how to ask the hard questions and run to the scriptures to find the answers. I'm not trying to tell you what to think politically or even theologically all the time. I think I really want to show you guys how to live a Christian life, how to faith a life surrendered to the word. Finish this video with me down below. How can we as Christians cry a little bit more? How can we live in the moment, suffer with those who are hurting? How would Jesus respond? Would he jump to politics? I really don't think so. But how do we still then take action and not just get stuck in the crying? How do we not become politically checked out or too politically checked in? I don't pretend to have that all figured out, but what I think we do need to do is sit more in the sorrow, cry with those who are hurting. And from there, we can actually preach the gospel in the midst of intense hurt, pain, and suffering. That would be my challenge for believers. But you know, if you want to hear what other people have to say about this, like what challenges pastors would have for other believers, I actually made a video on this. I interviewed pastors and asked them, "You're one thing that you would like Christians to know or better understand." And I have that in this video here. Click right here and I will see you guys in that video. Bye guys.